Welcome to the eCommerce podcast. Today we are talking to Jeff Holman, a former patent attorney turned startup legal expert. He saw that startups needed top-tier legal help but couldn't afford in-house counsel, so he built a fractional legal team to solve that problem. We'll dive into this journey, how he's helping founders stay focused and what they best and why early's legal strategy and save startups from big eggs and down the road. So let's get the party started. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Jeff, tell us a bit more about yourself. Why did you do that?
Why did I become an attorney? I don't know sometimes.
Good question, right?
Yeah. I actually wanted to go be in business, and somebody said you should become an attorney. Long story short, 20 years later, I've been practicing law for a long time, about 10 years, patent law, and there was a real transition point in my career when I went in-house, meaning I went from being part of a law firm to working for a company, and I realized a lot of outside counsel attorneys or attorneys in law firms are not practicing in ways that companies really need. And so it really opened my eyes that's led me to the point that I'm at now, where we have this practice that is really deliberately tailored to startups and getting the right attorneys to the right people for the right problems at the right time. So it's been a journey, but that's the short recap.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, we do have a new part of the show, and I always ask at the end of an episode, the former guy that I interviewed, what should I ask my new interview partner in the next podcast? And Siddharth, the founder of Subscript from the last episode, wanted me to ask you, what is the biggest early learning you had in building a business that made you change something significant about it?
The biggest early learning. So I think it might be what I just shared, to be honest. The learning I had that shaped the last 10 years of what I've done was going in-house. When you go and you work with an executive team versus when you're kind of a phone call or a city away from the team and you're not really working, you don't have as much context. When you're working with the team, you see what they need, and you see how urgently they need it, and you also see some of the things they don't need, right? In law firms, as lawyers, we're pretty famous for writing long legal memos and kind of covering all the topics and the what ifs and making up hypotheticals so we can write more what ifs. That was the downfall to some of my final exams in law school. Frankly, I didn't make up enough hypotheticals to walk through everything. And so, when you're in-house, none of that really matters. You don't care about the hypotheticals. You know what the situation is. That company has a specific problem, specific fact pattern, and you get to address that really specifically. So early learning, I'm going to say early in my transition from patent attorney to this startup general counsel role, definitely was learning the mindset of the executive team and what the business needs, rather than practicing the way that attorneys have taught me to practice.
Got it. Thanks for that answer. You will get your chance to ask the next question for the next episode in the end of the show. So it's not like in Suits or Lincoln Lawyer. It's not that life. It's a bit of real work,
Yes.
So your background blends engineering, business, and law. How has this unique combination shaped your approach to go and help those startups? To create a firm that really is the third party legal company, like having an in-house legal team for a startup. What made this decision?
Yeah, I think the background that I have. It brings a couple, each component of that, engineering, law, business, they all bring a different skill set to the table here. As I've looked back on this, because I've wondered myself, I'm like, why did I go through this? Why did I do all this schooling? Why did I go through this path? And, engineering really taught me to think systematically. Like when I look at a problem, I'm really looking at what is the overall system. It might be hard for me sometimes to say, oh, what's the right answer? Well, the right answer for this depends on what else is going on. So systematic thinking from my engineering degree has really shaped how I approach problems. The law degree, which was second, that really made me look at situations to assess risk. Like, if I make this decision, what happens? If I don't make this decision, what happens? What are the potential downsides to that? And so there's this risk component to kind of every decision you make. And of course, putting that in the system says that this ripples out and plays out in the system. And so every decision could have a really big impact. And then the third part of that is when I went and got my MBA, really the thing I feel like I took away from that program was the language to speak business, right?
Yeah.
So having that language has really turned me into what I call a translator. I'm working with innovators on legal issues to build their businesses, and I'm translating between the executive team and the attorneys, or I'm translating between the attorneys and the engineers, or the engineers and the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Like I do a lot of translating. It's all in English for me, but it's a lot of translating that I do.
I understand that. It's other terms, but it's need to tell something. You need to deal a lot, I think, with intellectual property. What are the biggest misconceptions startup founders have about intellectual property?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've done a ton of intellectual property, a lot of patents. People are inventing new things and we patent it, trademarks for their brands. I think the biggest misconception is that, there are two probably. One is people don't know when they need it, right? And so they think they need it when they don't, or they don't think they need it when they do. So there's just this kind of basic understanding that's missing sometimes for when you need IP and what you use it for. The other thing that I would say is with a lot of startup founders, the people who are missing their IP, what they're doing is they're putting, sometimes their life's energy, their life savings into building this business to generate revenue, but they're missing an opportunity to build value in the company by protecting their IP. Whether that's trademarking their brand. You're going to build this brand for 6 or 8 or 10 years anyways. Why not build the brand, and protect the brand that goes with the revenue stream that you've got. So that's one thing that I think, if I could point out to anybody, hey, an hour conversation with an attorney upfront about IP and opportunities for IP in your business, no matter what it is probably, it very well could lead to multiple on the valuation of your business in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that brings me to the next question, and I think it's unfortunately the truth, because I have seen that, and I feel that myself. Startups often delay legal services due to the cost. Mm-hmm. And what's the one thing they cannot afford to skip, no matter how tight the budget is?
It's like you're making me put all the Christmas presents into one big package here. So the one thing that people need to do a better job of as startup founders is documenting decisions, documenting the agreements they make and the things that they say and who they say it to when they said it. And it's more than just, hey, Norbert and I had a conversation about ownership. It's like, no, we had a conversation on this day, and I told him that as the CEO, I'm going to give him, certain equity, or we're going to do. So it's really the biggest problem that we have is lack of documentation. Now doesn't fit into like a little neat legal bucket necessarily, but that's the one thing that every founder needs to do a better job of, writing things down in detail.
And that's, I think, a very hard thing to do, because as a founder, you have so many other obligations and you have so many things to think about. And I see it also in my companies that especially communication and documentation of communication, even if it's not related to law cases or to the law itself, it's often project-related documentation, that this is something where a lot of companies leak in. So what do you recommend? How to document this? I mean, do you have a specific tool that you could recommend where you should write that down, or is there a specific pattern that you use to document things?
Yeah, here's what I would suggest, and it's the same thing that I suggest to my team here. Because not everything has to be a legal document or a 20-page agreement, right? When you have a discussion with somebody, the number one recommendation I can make to document that is just simply send an email. right? Just send an email, say, hey, it was great talking with you. I'm glad we had a chance to talk about the topic XYZ. Here's what I took away from that. Let me know if there's anything else I missed. It does add a little bit of time, but so many legal problems come from a lack of understanding, or better said, they come from different perspectives from two reasonable people who were participating in the same conversation, and they both walked away with different understandings from that conversation, and nobody took the time to clarify what they thought the conversation was. So it's, so you have this misunderstanding, these misaligned expectations that could, with a 1 minute email sometimes could be a non-issue going forward.
Yeah, got it. I think we have a good German spokesword here in Mundart. Wer schreibt, der bleibt, which means who is writing will stay.
Yes,
it's something like that, and it's the truth, unfortunately.
That's funny. So I'm not going to try to repeat that because I'm sure I would not say it anywhere close to.
It would be funny, I think.
Well, I'll try it if you want. What was it again?
No, don't worry, it's good.
So in the law, there's also a kind of a governing principle. Whoever drafts the contract, actually, if there's an interpretation question in the contract, the contract is interpreted in favor of the non-drafting party, right? So it's kind of the opposite of the saying that you just mentioned there, because the person, as attorneys, we're responsible for communicating well with people, and if we didn't do a good job, the other side could say, well, that's not what I understood from it, and here's the reason I understood it differently. So you need to prove that it means what you think it means.
Oh gosh, it's always a strange world. Yeah, really. Many SaaS and e-commerce businesses launch with generic terms of services and privacy policy and all of kind of this. Even in e-commerce, I mean, in e-commerce it's a bit more simple because it's sending goods from A to B, and it's, I think, quite similar for most of the e-commerce companies. But what are the hidden dangers of, let's say, using cookie cutter legal templates and all these generic templates?
Yeah, so it depends on the type of company. In e-commerce companies, what you'll see is there's a lot of potential for product liability, perhaps, depending on what type of products you're selling. And so your warranties, your guarantees, your product liability, even indemnification, which means indemnification is, will you be responsible if the buyer of your product creates liability for somebody else, right? Will they come back to you and say, no, you're actually the one who has to pay this other person, not me. So product, everything related to product liability becomes really important. And in a generic, terms and conditions or terms of service, you might not be covering that very well. The other one that covers across industries right now is privacy and data security. Data security may not be the most important thing for an e-commerce company, perhaps, but when you get into SaaS businesses, data security is often very important, because a lot of SaaS companies are, you're not just creating an account to use their service, you're creating an account to put your data into their service, and now they have your data, or maybe you're using their service for your customer service. You've got multiple, kind of a chain of privacy and data security issues out there. So data security is the other really big one for across the board, pretty much.
Yeah, I assume that. I see it is something that you see, especially when you have in the e-commerce sector, like we are with SyncSpider. It's you not just get the data of the customers, you get the data of their customers when you transfer data from A to B. So it needs to be written very careful. It needs to have a lot of effort put into those legal informations, just to build security also for them.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, a very, very big trust signal. Especially when we stay in the e-commerce space where we come from. What's one legal loophole or compliance issue that brands consistently overlook?
A compliance issue. Here's one that you might not think of. If you're running your own Shopify website, for example, as opposed to selling everything on another platform like Amazon or whatever, if you're running your own Shopify or other website to sell your product, at least in the US, then there are companies out there who will essentially try to find reasons. If you look like a successful company, they'll want to sue you for things like ADA compliance. And here in the United States, ADA stands for American with Disabilities Act, meaning that your website has to have accessibility to people who, might have some type of disability in their life. And so people will, I don't want to say it's illegitimate because, ADA and compliance is a real thing. There are people who really need that, but there are companies who seem to approach this in a predatory manner, and they will go and they'll find websites that don't appear to comply. They'll file a complaint, and they're usually looking for a really quick $10,000 or $20,000 settlement from you, just to make them go away. So that's an area that probably is not at the top of people's mind when they're thinking about, making and selling their toy product, on the internet.
Oh yeah, we have something in Germany as well like this. We call them ambulance cheeser.
Yes.
These are those guys who find something on your website and send you a letter in the name of a customer.
Yes.
And then they want to sue you for a couple of €1,000 in our case, and sign something that you never do this again. And typically they have quite good luck, especially when the GDPR appeared here in Germany. They found things like using Google fonts which are not GDPR compliant. And they said, are we going to be tracked by Google now, although we didn't allow it for something like that? And wanted to file cases around that. Of course, the state has been done something about that, but it's unfortunately that something like this happens to e-commerce stores worldwide. Actually, I mean, you have those cases for the liability. Do you fight with customers against such letters, or can you help companies with that?
We have helped. It's oftentimes though quicker and easier and less expensive to settle these cases, which is the ambulance chasers know that, and that's why they're in this business, because they know they can get a cheaper settlement, and they don't have to fight many of them, unfortunately.
Yeah. There is a news story coming up now for attorneys. It's AI. So
yes.
How do you treat that? What's coming up? How is AI transforming the industry?
It has attorneys very scared for lots of reasons, right? It's not very good. I've had clients bring me contracts and things that they've drafted with AI, and they said, "Hey, can I use this?" And I'm like, "I can use it, but nothing's correct. Like the law is not right. The date that the facts are not right." And so it's not good enough to replace attorneys yet. And I don't know that it will ever fully replace us, but it's going to make tasks faster and easier. The other reason attorneys are scared is here in the United States, there are some really wild stories about attorneys using AI to draft their court documents. And those, of course, include hallucinations or made up cases that don't actually exist. And these attorneys often get called out publicly, perhaps sanctioned. So it's not really, we're in a very detailed space, and it's not really good enough and trustworthy enough to use across the board. But that being said, I think we're going to see it in the next 5 years. Two things. It's going to make attorneys a lot more efficient. We'll find ways to incorporate it without exposing ourselves to some of those big risks. And two, in an interesting way, some people are saying, that AI, because it will make us more efficient, will actually make it so that we have to bill clients less, right? Because if we're more efficient, we need to pass those savings on to our clients, and so we're going to need more work to make the same amount of money because we're more efficient, as opposed to some companies that would probably take the approach of, well, we're more efficient and we'll keep charging the same amount, so we're going to make a lot more money. It'll be interesting to see if the courts and the bar associations actually adopt that approach or not.
Perfect point to jump into how much does intellectual strategies cost. So you're working for startups, and guys, if you need a lawyer and you're a startup, just go and visit intellectualstrategies.com. and see what they can offer. But tell us a bit more about your pricing strategy there. So are you charging a subscription? Are you doing billable hours? What is your approach?
Yeah. So because we have this unique fractional legal team approach, we do work with a lot of clients on a subscription basis, and that might be a few $1,000s a month, or it might be 20,000 or more a month. It really depends on the size and scale and growth trajectory of your business. But we try to, of course, scale our services to the business as as we start and as we get going. Outside of our fractional legal services, just because we have good expertise across the board, we have a lot of other services when people come to us, for example, for patents and trademarks, forming entities, maybe doing contract reviews. We do a lot of things on flat fees. And because we've done a lot of patents, we've done a lot of trademarks. It's easy for us to say, do you want to have, our basic package, our medium package, or our priority package? And the scope changes. So we do a lot of flat fee work, which also makes it, very predictable for our clients, which, from the last thing we want to do, we being my firm, not all attorneys generally, we don't want to surprise people with a bill that's 5 times more than what you thought you were getting into. We don't feel like that makes a great long-term relationship. So we really are good about establishing fixed flat fees for scope and predictability purposes. And then some stuff is just too hard to anticipate exactly what will happen, and it becomes an hourly project. So there's some flexibility there in how we bill. When I talk to new companies who are approaching us, they'll often come with one of two things. They'll say, I need a patent, a trademark, or a company, and we have packages for those. So it's an easy conversation. Or they'll say, Jeff, I've got a lot of problems. I should have done this and this and this, and I did this thing, and I think it's a problem, and I haven't cleaned any of it up yet. I need someone to come in and clean this up. And that usually turns into our fractional service where we say, well, what's your budget? Your budget will determine how fast we can start cleaning things up for you. So,
yeah, got it. Cool. What is the most unusual or unexpected legal challenge you have ever solved for an e-commerce company?
The most unexpected legal challenge. I'll tell you a quick story that I love.
Yeah.
A friend of mine came to me and said, Jeff, our company's rebranding. This is a hundreds of millions of dollars company, right? We're rebranding the company, and my executive team wants to call it this name. And somebody else already owns the domain for that name. And so we don't want them to know that we want to buy the domain, but we need someone to go buy the domain for us. And so I had what turned out to be a very extended and interesting conversation with this one domain owner out of California. And I'll just say, in the end, we offered some money. We offered different things. We had lots of conversations. We eventually told him who the company was, because the company has a very kind of humanitarian aspect to it, and we thought that might be helpful. So we tried a lot of different things to close this deal with this website, and he was really stuck on it. And eventually we came up with the idea based on his cultural background and everything. I said, well, what if because he seemed, it seemed like he thought there were some really important things he wanted to be a part of the story in a way, but we didn't know how to make him a part of the story. He liked the cause of the company. So in the end, I said, well, what if we do this? What if we take and we've talked about all the numbers. All the numbers seem to be good. We've talked about using an attorney to escrow the money and use, escrow the domain, so everything gets transferred over. My client has offered to create 2 plaques. I don't remember if it was 1 or 2 plaques. What if we create a plaque for you? Because they think it's really important that your contribution to their business, by you making this available, it makes their service of it more broadly available, and they want to recognize you for that. And so they've suggested that it would be great to create a plaque for you. And I don't remember if I suggested or if he suggested, maybe there should be 2 plaques. We'll send you a plaque so that you can put it in your home or wherever you want. And then we'll create a second plaque so that the company can display that in their offices. And I did not think this would work, and it's, it wasn't a legal trick so much as just negotiation skills. It was the plaque that sold the deal. Like
Awesome.
we probably could have bought that website for less money even had we known that just that recognition, that validation to the seller was really important. And so that's a fun story about creative negotiations to get a deal done.
It's really a nice story and a very, very smart one that everyone, I think, wants to hear from a lawyer to go different routes and ways and to get the things done. That's really cool. One thing that also, I just want to know a bit more about that, because we do have so many regulations, especially here in Europe, GDPR, AI laws, e-commerce law, what else? There is so much coming up here in Europe, the next couple of years as well, Accessibility Act as well here. I think it's the same in the US. So a lot of changes come up. How do you deal with so many new regulations coming up?
It's an interesting question, because I was doing some research on my own for another topic about the evolution of regulations in the United States. And I'm sure it's similar in Europe. Up until like the 1950s, there were very few major regulations. Now there are, all the alphabet agencies, right? All the agencies that regulate everything, like you're mentioning, and it's just proliferated. I don't think it's going to get easier. I think it's going to get more complicated. I think the other complicating factor, at least for me and probably for you and a lot of people we deal with, is that they're small companies, right? And they don't have the expertise available to them at a price point that makes sense to be able to comply with everything. They're trying to launch a new product into a new target segment, and they're already, you think of companies like Uber or Airbnb, they were likely violating a lot of laws just to start their company, right? And so we have some clients who are already on the edge of technology, maybe on the edge of regulatory compliance, and yet there's more and more coming out. So this probably highlights one of the main differences between how a law firm attorney, a normal law firm attorney, would approach a topic versus how what I would call an in-house attorney would approach a topic. And that is that a law firm attorney will say, let me tell you all the ways that what you're doing can't be done and why you can't do it. And the executive team, bless their hearts, they're going to probably say, well, we're still going to do it. So how do we minimize our risk when we do it? Because we're not going to not do it, even though you tell us we shouldn't do it. And so being an in-house attorney, you start to say, you stop saying, don't do this. And you start saying, well, if you do this, be aware of these things and understand that there are risks here and here and here. And I don't have a solution for how we're going to simplify this process for people. Other than attorneys will, I think, more and more need to take the approach of how do we empower our clients who are already on the edge of things and get them to the point where they can do things with the least risk possible, because they're going to do them anyways. And we want to help them minimize the risk.
Super duper answer. Thank you. Well, you're coming close to an end. I have two more questions. The first question, what's the best attorney joke you know?
Oh, there aren't any good attorney jokes. I've never heard a good attorney joke
really?
that I like. No,
they are good.
I think there's one that I've heard several times, and it has something to do with a bus full of attorneys at the bottom. What do you call a bus full of attorneys at the bottom of the ocean? It's a good start.
Okay, it's a good one. Yeah, got it. But this is so typical in the US, I think, attorney joke, right?
There are a lot.
Cliche.
It's a cliche in the United States. Do they not do attorney jokes in Europe as much?
Not as much. No, we have some other kind of them. This is something what you see in a lot of shows and TV series, and that's always this kind of jokes. And this is why I ask you. The typical actually question of the show is who has taught you the most about legal matters or e-commerce in your career?
Who has taught me the most? I don't have one person necessarily. I've been kind of a lone wolf in a lot of ways, doing a lot of stuff, but I learned so much from my clients. I have clients. What I love is I have clients who are in e-commerce, and then I have clients who are in companies servicing the e-commerce clients, and then I have companies who are working with them. So there's this ecosystem of clients and sometimes client affiliates that every day is something new that I learn. And I kind of, when I went into coming back full circle, when I went into engineering, I knew I didn't want to be an engineer forever. I don't know how I knew that, but I always said to myself, I want to go into engineering. I love learning, and I love, seeing how things work. And so I went into engineering, and then I went into law, and that kind of experimentation mentality carried over, and not everybody liked it, right? I'd take stuff I'd be like, I wonder what the partner attorney will think of this argument. And I would write stuff because I wanted to not necessarily get a reaction in a bad way, but I wanted to try a twist, try something different. It's like, if it's the same thing we did with the plaque, try something different and see if it works. And so I've taken that mentality a lot. And so working with innovators early in my career, working with these companies, I learn something new probably every day from my clients, whether that's about their business, about the industry, sometimes about my business. Like, I learn from everybody, and it's a fantastic place to be for somebody who loves to learn and experiment, I think.
What a fantastic answer. Really nice one. Thank you. Well, this is, I would say, the Columbo question, because I said already it's the last, but still have one. Yeah. The really last question for today. What would you like to ask our next guest?
I have two questions. One's really easy. What's your favorite ice cream? Just because I'm an ice cream guy. But the other one, they might want it.
Chocolate and lemon. Okay, next.
Together or separate?
Yeah, always together. Always together. Chocolate and lemon, always together.
I will have to try that. I have not tried those together. I just learned something new.
Yeah.
The other question I'd ask is, what is it that you do in your business to make your customer experience stand above everybody else?
Wow, super question. I love that. And we will ask our next guest tomorrow in the next episode. This week is really insane. 3 recordings after each other.
Very busy.
But that's cool. But busy one. Well, let's wrap it up. Thank you so much for being part of the eCommerce podcast, Jeff. It was really a pleasure talking to you and sharing your insights on how startups can stay legal, protected without breaking the bank, actually. So if you found this episode valuable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're building a startup, take Jeff's advice. Don't wait until it's too late and get your legal foundation in place. A little preparation can save a lot of troubles. Thank you so much for being part of the show.
Thank you.
And that's it for this episode of the eCommerce podcast. If you enjoyed listening and would like us find and interview more e-commerce operations experts, please search for eCommerce podcast in your favorite podcast listening app and then subscribe, rate, and review. Until next time,